Hey, it's Carrie Joe.
Hey, it's Anna. Join us as we learn new things, challenge our assumptions, and grow as people. Welcome to the Heretical Hippies podcast.
In this season, we are going to explore the intersection of curiosity and wonder, and hopefully develop some fresh ways to see the world and ourselves. So come along for the ride, or don't. Either way, we're going to hit record. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode with Heretical Hippies. I'm Carrie Joe. I'm here with my very good friend Anna.
Hi, guys. I'm ready to talk about this today. Sorry, I was distracted for a second.
That's cool. We're still getting into the groove here, so.
Yeah, we are. We're still waking up, but yeah, I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay. Today, we are discussing the positives of Christianity. And I have to put a little air asterisk there because you'll hear both from Anna and myself our thoughts on this and how we both have realized in coming up with these lists that it is definitely not black and white. Spoiler alert, nothing is.
Right.
But I think it's easier to approach a topic when there is some sense of a black and white nature to it for me.
Sure.
And that kind of complicated things, to be honest. But I would love to hear your list and your caveat and anything else you want to share with us today, Anna.
Yeah. Gosh, yeah, this process of learning, like just meditating and thinking about like the past and ruminating over just the things that happened many years ago even, it was interesting. Like, going back through my memory is one challenge in and of itself, but, I think Carrie Joe mentioned it well on, I think, her Instagram or Facebook, just about this being, like, all basically, what are some positives even though they come with some baggage? And, so she's right. It's not black and white. I wanna share a quote from one of my favorite, Buddhist nuns, Pema Chodron,
Oh, yeah, I love her.
and, good old Pema.
Mhm.
It isn't what happens to us that causes us to suffer. It's what we say to ourselves about what happens.
Mm.
That is a truth that I'm practicing in my own life, and I don't think it's easy. Suffering in Buddhism is not necessarily what happens to you, but how you interpret what happens to you. And the pain is real. The suffering as a result of it is what we're talking about.
Mhm.
So, real negative things happened in our walk as Christians or in life in general, because that's life, right? But we carry a pain with us that usually doesn't have to do with that thing anymore. It has more to do with the story we've told us ourselves about that thing, or the
Isn't clinging, is that what Buddhists would say? Like, clinging
maybe.
to things causes suffering, like continued
Mhm.
suffering?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm saying in all of this is that getting to the positives, I had to kind of work through that, like
Mhm.
the narrative that I have for myself and for my experience, to weed through the things that I know are not true, or the ways that I walked out my faith that I know are damaging and hurtful and deceptive. And I had to weed through that, that narrative that I have and the reality of some of the specific situations in order to find the gems and the nuggets. And they're there, and it wasn't terribly hard with some things, but it was a process. And so my next point I think I want to make is that in life, we're trying new things all the time. We're learning, we're growing, we're experiencing, and we're being able to recognize as you get more and more mature in life, you're able to recognize, oh, that way doesn't work very well. I'll try this other way. Well, we just happened to choose a way that was all encompassing in our
Mhm.
life. And then we finally realize and recognize the fallacies in it, and we're able to change course. that's a pattern that everyone has to go through in life. It's like
Yeah.
I'm trying to recycle some of what I got out of my Christianity because it's, um, I think, a much more beautiful way of going through life, and trying to extract every bit of silver lining that you can. And at the same time, I'm not wanting to disguise my experience to be something that it wasn't, you know?
Yeah, I think that's really important.
Mhm,
Because, like we said earlier, it's not black and white. You can't just have the good and the bad. It's often a two-sided coin.
mhm.
Yeah, I think it's a really healthy way of seeing things.
Well, and I think that especially as a young person, I really did think everything was black and white, and at one point in my life, like, I guess in everybody's naivety, we probably do at some point, and I was talking to my daughter yesterday about some of my faults as a mother, and, um, at the same time that I had those faults, I also was an amazing mother, you know?
You were
So, at
probably
least
more so an amazing mother, just happened to have some faults. I wanna reword that for you.
That's it's probably true, yeah, it's probably true. Yeah, life is messy, and
Sure is.
our Christianity was messy, and, it was fraught with negativity. Now, hindsight, we see where those fallacies when that suffering was, and we also can find a little bit of the silver lining, which is some of the stuff that we're gonna talk about today.
Yeah, honestly, Anna, it's good that you had the preamble because as far as what I'm contributing to this episode, it's gonna be pretty short.
Mhm.
So, like, we gotta give the listeners something to think about and ponder. So good
Sure.
job. Thanks for
Well,
doing that.
I'd love to hear something that you found in your meditation about this.
Like, do you want me to start my list, or do you want me to also give my asterisk caveat?
Go for it. Asterisk caveat and
Okay.
start the list.
Okay, I echo what Anna has shared already. In my post on Facebook, I posted this in January of 25. We're gonna publish this episode much later, so if you wanted to go back and check that out, you can do that on my Heretical Hippie page, but let me bring it up here. So, what I asked was, those who have deconstructed, what have you gained because of your time in Christianity? Looking for any pros you can think of, even if it came at a cost. And the reason I worded it that way, I actually genuinely wanted to know because when I sat down to make my list, the first thing I wrote down, and I was like, yeah, but that was still fucked. Like, it
Mhm.
was a positive at the time, but that was still totally messed up. And
Yeah.
so I think I wrote maybe 2 or 3 down, and then I posted that because I thought, "I need a little help here," and I love to hear of other people's experiences, so it was really interesting. I had a lot of people chime in, and one of my friends that I served with on the field in Nigeria with, he articulated it so well, and he said, "My sense of social justice came partly through the church. I think other factors such as my family and personality were probably equally important, but the progressive wing of evangelicalism set my wife and I, and eventually our kids, on a path in which social justice was very important." And then he says some more things, but then in another paragraph, he says, "If you're talking about gains that have outlasted my Christian experience, I'm not sure there are others. I suppose that being able to understand the experience of evangelicals counts for something, just like living in Nigeria and Iran helped me understand African Christians, Muslims, and cultures." And I thanked him because I thought this is it. This is why I could not come up with, well, here's a positive thing,
Mm.
and then have a thought that follows right on the heels of that of, well, god damn it. Like,
Mhm.
I I was trying to find positives that are still working for me today, and I can really only think of one, and that would be
Mhm.
Steven,
Mm. Mm.
which begets my boys, so my family. That is
Mhm.
the only positive that I feel remains. That's probably not true. That's the most tangible positive that I feel remains from my time in Christianity. So all that to say, I wanted to make sure people who are listening, they don't hear this as, "Oh, these have lasted well into our deconstructed years," for both me and Anna. I would say the majority of it has not, but we also want to give some airtime to the positives that were positive for us in that moment in our lives. And
Mm.
I don't want to always be negative. I really don't. I'm not that type of person, but as I'm moving through these memories and like Anna said, like racking our brains for our experiences in those times, where we stand now, it's really difficult not to see both the positives and the negatives because we're now aware. It's like you can't unsee it. Once your eyes are
Mhm.
open, you can't unsee that.
Mhm.
And so all of these things that I'm going to share comes at a with great harm or at a steep cost.
Mhm.
And I don't know that I'm going to go into that because we kind of covered that in the negatives of Christianity. And I bet if you listen to these side by side, you would kind of find the flip side of the coin for each of these episodes. We didn't tailor it that way, but I'm guessing
Mhm.
that's what would happen. So
Sure.
all that to say, um, the first one I wrote was community wherever we moved. We moved a lot. And once we relocated, we give ourselves a couple weeks to settle in, unpack, whatever, and then we would look for a church. Or maybe we were told of a church by our former church members and family. Oh, hey, check this one out. I know somebody who's pastoring there. It's a really great community.
Mhm.
So that was a very good thing. It was great to be plugged into a community right away and not have to go through all of the craziness of going to mommy me play dates, trying to connect with somebody, figuring out if you're going to vibe or not. It was kind of a built-in pseudo vibe, at a church because you're operating on this shared belief system and you make that the foundation of the connection.
That's
Brothers
a
and sisters in Christ, right?
right. That was definitely on my list as well. And I actually wrote built-in community as
Yeah,
well. Like yeah, and the practicing of community, I think that that dynamic is really mostly found within religion.
absolutely. That is the one thing I would say is redeeming about religion.
Mhm.
They do community well.
Mhm.
Again, not without its baggage and
Sure.
tomfuckery or whatever. What is it?
Yeah.
Tomfoolery? Was that what? Anyway, I don't know.
I think
But
it taught me though, it did teach me to empathize because I being around people that much and learning how to serve others was part of that community. And so when you're learning how to serve, you're trying to think through their eyes, what would they need, you
mhm,
know? And that practice of thinking about others on a daily basis in that way, like I thought about myself too, but thought about others a lot. Like, how can
mhm.
I serve? How can I serve? How can I serve? And I think in a lot of ways, it trained my mind and my heart to know how to look for ways to love other people.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a really great positive. And I would presume that that remains today, that that is something that has outlasted
Absolutely.
your Christian experience.
In addition to that, and the flip side of that was I also learned how to receive help from other people. Like when I first started, when we early on in our community life with other believers, like we were in tight community. We lived in the same neighborhood. We intentionally lived in the same houses in the same neighborhoods. And we also lived in one community that was all living in the same building. And we lived in a lot of communal houses where we shared housing together. And a lot of the or a lot of the culture today is very isolated. You buy your own house, you have your own washing machine, you do everything yourself. It's very separate. Whereas in the community life that I experienced, it was very interconnected and it was new for me. I didn't grow up that way. And so when I was in situations where I needed help, the pattern and the example that I saw growing up was you just pulled yourself up by your bootstraps and you
Mhm.
figured a way to do it, which is valuable in and of itself. But to receive help from other people in times where you feel like you should be able to do it yourself, it's very humbling. So I remember there was a process for me of letting go and learning how to receive and accept help from others.
Yeah, that's a great life skill.
What's the
Do you wanna
next
go
thing
with
on your list?
Oh, me next, okay. So when I first became a Christian, it gave me a place to land after a really big breakup in my life. My boyfriend of 4 years broke up with me, and that's, like, my conversion story in a nutshell. I was
Mm.
devastated, the Christians were there to pick me up, and I was in.
Mm.
That's, like, yeah, my half of an elevator ride pitch. It kept me from self-destruction. And I think that is true. Before he broke up with me, I was planning on going to a frat party that night. And then he broke up with me. I went back to school and I was still planning on going. And the emotional state that I was in was not conducive for safety at a frat party. I was probably going to get drunk off my ass, and I don't even want to think about what might have happened. So that alone makes me thankful that it immediately provided a guardrail.
Mm.
And weirdly it did, because I knew nothing of Christianity, like nothing of it. And then that's like I didn't go.
Mm.
And I'm so thankful for that. I
There's
realized
some ways that it has tailored our life that has protected us from some harms that I'm really thankful for.
yes, absolutely. And another thing, this actually leads to the next thing on my list, was it for me it offered certainty. And I think for a lot of people it does, and that can be a real comfort.
Mhm.
And giving like that rule book, that user manual to life, that feels safe. And I think that is an important aspect for people when they're working out of lives of trauma. Think that is a very helpful and useful aspect to Christianity that it has to offer.
Mhm.
I'm not saying it's not harmful because it also, for me, totally shut down critical thinking.
Mm.
That rule book, the user manual, because God said so. I have a question, because God said so. Well, what about this? Because God said so. It's just
Mhm.
complete gaslighting.
Mm.
So, the flip side of it. But I think for a lot of people who still find religion helpful, they would say that they appreciate the certainty.
I also think there's a growing number of Christians that are not so much about the certainty as much as just the comfort of believing in something beyond themselves, you know?
Mhm.
That, I think that just and certainty and comfort are very close in their effect on us. So, they're very similar in some ways, but I think there's a lot of Christians that say, "Well, I'm not very certain, but it does provide me some comfort in believing this." I think there's a spectrum of both within religion, there's a spectrum of certainty and a spectrum of comfort, but I think I would probably say for me, I definitely was influenced by the certainty and the comfort, but the certainty was a huge part, like, I wanna know the truth, and this
Right.
is the truth.
Yeah, for those truth seekers out there, like you and I both, it was an amazing ride.
Mhm.
Like studying the scriptures, learning new things in Bible study, hearing new concepts from the pulpit. It was incredible in the moment. It's like, "Oh
Mhm.
my gosh, like I'm learning all these true, factual, amazing, ethereal things."
Right.
And I'm not gonna give commentary on what I think about that now, y'all probably know, but
Right.
in the moment, like, at the time, that felt really good, and honestly, it felt adventurous.
Mhm.
I don't think it actually was, because there were so many guardrails and loopholes and spiritual bypassing and things that were happening to kinda keep me reined in to a certain line of thought, and I see that now. That was not freedom, that was not adventure, that was control. Um, but it felt like that. It sure felt
Mhm.
amazing in the moment.
Yeah. One of the things that makes me think of is it gave me, the courage and the boldness to say things to people that I may not have otherwise said, you know?
Mhm.
But and even though maybe I said some things that hindsight weren't maybe the best things to say to people, I wasn't like a Bible thumper, I was more like an encourager. It wasn't polarizing usually what I was saying to people, it was more or less, supporting, but, I think thinking that I had something special to give and believing that I had the truth enabled me to sometimes say things to people that I wouldn't have otherwise said. I mean, I remember going up to complete strangers, and just saying, "Hey, God loves you, and would you like me to pray for you?" kinda thing. And people's lives were impacted, I think, to some degree because of that.
Mhm.
And, so yeah,
Yeah,
with
it's not all
courage.
bad.
Mm-mm.
I feel like even terribly bad things can have a kernel of goodness in there.
Mhm.
Not all. I'm not
Right.
saying all all terrible things have a kernel of goodness, but often. And I think that's what we're trying to do here is like we're trying to find those little flecks of gold
Mhm.
and shine a little light on it so that we don't always sound angry and bitter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's not where we want to be. And
Right.
we also want to, I think it's important too for us always that we keep in mind our listeners and their mindset and the various places they might be standing in their beliefs and their thoughts and to challenge and encourage them. And I think this will be both challenging to some people in the audience and encouraging to other people in the audience, maybe a little bit of both.
Mhm.
But yeah, I kind of echo your sentiment on, having the moxie to say things that you normally wouldn't or go up to random people. I definitely did that shit.
Mhm.
Um, it also trained my ability to defend my position,
Mm.
kind of in line with what you're saying. I always had an answer to give for the hope that I had. I
Yeah.
took that scripture very seriously. Because of the mission to spread the gospel and share the truth with people, being at the heart of my Christian experience, I became really good at not only being able to defend my position, but it also encouraged me to develop the skill of finding a point of connection with people.
Mm.
We could be as vastly different as you can imagine, and I would still in conversation be able to find a point of connection and with that agenda in mind,
Right.
work in the gospel.
Sure.
And I see now how vastly manipulative that is and seeing a person as a project, you can't get around that. You may be having a real connection with them, but the agenda makes them a project. The
Mhm.
agenda to share the gospel turns them into something to be conquered. And I hate that in retrospect. But I will say I'm probably better at connecting with people because of those experiences. It's also a
Mm.
natural part of my personality, so I'm not gonna, like, say that I completely got that from Christianity because I definitely didn't. But I
It
had
was
way more opportunities to, like, practice it.
Yeah, it was I was about to say it was like a, playing field that you could practice it on, you know?
Correct.
I think I learned how to speak life over people. Um, I learned how to encourage like, it was the same thing, like, it was the playing field for me to practice, um, regularly telling people things that would encourage them and, build them up.
And you still do that. You do that for me all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
It's part of my personality too, like what you're saying, but, you know, had I not had the community that supported that type of behavior, I may not have learned how to express it to the degree that I have.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think there's a few other things I have on my list are like, I learned how to express my faith in my own unique way. Like I did feel like even though my faith was similar to a lot of people around me in my community, my expression of it, I always felt was my own unique version. And my husband and I definitely learned how to walk out our beliefs very independently. There were times where I felt like we were heavily influenced by the environment enough to possibly even change course of what we wanted or what we said. But in general, I feel like we always really took more of a independent expression of our own faith. Like we weren't afraid to say to somebody, even within the church, that that's an interesting view. It's not the one I have,
Mm.
but that's an interesting view. The communities that we were in too fostered that
I was
to a
just gonna
great
ask you
deal.
that because
Mhm.
hearing that first part, I would have said, "Well, that sounds more like a personality thing, more so than Christianity encouraged that in you." But that's really fascinating that the communities you were in provided opportunity for developing that.
Yeah, we were not ever a part of a organized church. Oh, I shouldn't say that. An organized building of a
Yeah.
church, you know? Because of that part of our personality, we knew that we couldn't be a part of traditional, like, church settings. We always chose alternative church type settings, mainly small home churches, and, um, in those settings, there was a lot of freedom. So,
Mm. That's cool. I
it's
like that.
one I really appreciate that was my personal experience and that I wasn't, um It wasn't anything else. But
Yeah.
it also created this camaraderie that was beautiful for my experience. I had a camaraderie with a lot of the believers and that I still have a camaraderie with, and ironically, a lot of them are deconstructed now. Um,
That's not
so that
surprising, though.
I know, and that adds to the camaraderie, right? Like,
Right,
we not only
exactly.
did we walk through our faith together for 20 years, but now we're walking through our deconstruction together,
Yeah.
and it's pretty amazing, actually. Was there something else on your list?
I do have a few more.
Go for it.
Um, yeah, so I do recognize that I did grow, albeit small strides. I did grow as a human.
Mm.
I would say I grew more socially than I did emotionally and intellectually because I feel like the emotion and intellectual side of things was definitely under control. And I don't mean like I was out of control. I mean it was being controlled for me.
Mm.
So I see that as a huge negative, like, and we've talked about that, like, it shut down critical thinking, it shut down all these things. But I did make small steps in growing as a human, and I'm not gonna discount that and say, "Oh, well, like, it was mostly shit." Well, maybe, but again, there's that fleck of gold that I can find. It's better growing in small steps than not growing at all. So I guess
Mhm.
that's what I'm trying to choose to see it as. And then another thing in that kind of growth mindset, I had opportunities to develop my leadership skills. And that comes with a huge asterisk because if I were outside of the church, I probably would have had more opportunity to develop that.
Mm.
But I also want to recognize the fact that I did have opportunity. I mean, they were baked into the system, like I could do nursery things, I could do little Sunday school lessons, and I say could do because, like women in my situation were given very niche roles. We were pigeonholed big time. I could lead small groups. I could be a discussion group leader at the MOPS meetings. I could give messages at the MOPS meetings, which I did. I did all those things. And I am grateful for those opportunities and those experiences because, again, life experience. I feel like I'm decently well spoken now because of those opportunities. But
Mm.
I wonder if if I hadn't, like, if we play the what if game, if I hadn't been confined to very specific roles of leadership within the church, how much greater could my leadership have grown in the meantime? I don't know. It's one of those we'll never know. And it doesn't really matter. But I am thankful for opportunities to have developed leadership qualities and I think also communication skills to some degree. Now, I'm
Mhm.
not saying this is not going to be a super polished podcast, people, so don't like get your hopes up. You're getting the best from me. I'm doing my best. So I don't want to like create ill-conceived expectations of me on here. But yes, those things were good, and I am thankful for those. I have a few more, but, do you have any more, Anna, to
No,
add?
I to piggyback on that, like, I agree, it's something I hadn't put on my list, but it was a setting in which I was able to practice my own leadership skills as well, and I think you and I both have leadership qualities to our personalities already, and so, like you said, it probably would have been different had you not been in that controlled setting, but, I had a lot of, really positive female leaders in our fellowship, um, and they were really good examples of what it looks like to do that. So yeah, my experience was different and I kind of wish though, like you're saying, I feel like my leadership qualities would have developed differently and I don't know if that would have been good or bad. You know? I'm
Yeah,
not sure. But I do know I had the opportunity in my particular version of Christianity that um where I was able to practice leading quite often.
yeah,
And so I was thankful for that as well.
yeah, no, that's awesome. So finishing up my list,
Mhm.
I've got 3 more things. One is I had some amazing experiences. We lived in Nigeria. We got to experience that culture. We got to learn about and love some people there, and we made excellent friendships. I miss many people to this day, the friendships that we've made there. And that's an experience I'm not sure I would have pursued outside of Christianity,
Mhm.
to be completely honest. I think I would have forfeited that if I weren't a
Yeah.
Christian.
Yeah.
And I am super thankful for the way that it has changed my paradigm. It has shifted the way I view many social justice issues. It gives me such a deep respect, love, care, and concern for people who are different than me and who are
Mhm.
treated differently than me as a white woman of privilege. And I don't take that lightly. I think I love that part of me, and I'm very thankful for that, for all those experiences leading up to how I see the world now. Not to say we couldn't have experienced something like that outside of Christianity. I just think it would have been highly unlikely. And along with that comes with meeting some incredible people. I'm not sure I would have gone through Revelation Wellness training had I not been in Nigeria, because I wanted to develop a skill set that I could use to like actually feel like I was offering something on the mission field. And that's where I met you.
Mhm.
And I'm so fucking thankful for that. Like our friendship is so meaningful to me, and you know that old iron sharpens iron verse, that's truth. That is truth. And Anna and I are doing that, and I love that aspect of our relationship. And I also love that we both have so much in common with our faith histories, that this gives us such a safe space to exist. And so I wouldn't undo it. You know, if somebody asked me if you could turn back time and undo any of it, would you? Probably I would not. Maybe
Mhm.
super small aspects of it I would, to avoid trauma or heartache or whatever, but most of it I wouldn't undo, because I would have forfeit my relationship with you, and I would have forfeited, which again, this is one of my most favorite positives of Christianity, my husband and my kids,
Right.
and the closeness that we've developed because of our time on the mission field. I mean, our family is like probably ridiculously close.
Mhm.
And not that some families aren't like that. Some families are like that just by virtue of how they've lived, but I just feel like that has added an element to our experience of each other that I don't know that we could have found that anywhere else. So,
Yeah.
you know, we say all these positives with a caveat, but I wouldn't undo the caveats,
Mhm.
because I would have just not had any of that in my life. And I guess at the end of the day, I'm happy to land there. I'm happy to go through the process of recalling experiences, looking at the positives, also identifying the negatives that come with it. But at the end of that thought experiment, realizing that I wouldn't change a fucking thing.
Yeah. Wow. I don't know if I would either. There was things them about my story that I think I would I don't know. It's hard to fully 100% completely surrender to, I wouldn't change anything, you know?
Right. That comes with a caveat as well.
Right, right. But but I definitely am thankful for a lot enough to look back and go, I wouldn't have my family. I wouldn't have met my husband. I wouldn't have had my kids. I mean, it's like, how can you, those hypotheticals are so impossible to like truly know because you don't know what other situations would have, what other outcomes would have been. You just know that what you have now, you're very thankful for. And I agreed too. Like, I met a lot of amazing people as a result of Christianity. I met people from all over the world, was a part of multiple communities all throughout the United States, and I loved meeting people and immediately being able to just dive in and connect with them on so many levels, and that was a beautiful experience for sure.
Yeah. And I love that we have that in common. And I think maybe that's a really great place to end, to leave people wondering about their own journey. And would you change anything?
Mhm.
That's an interesting question to pose for yourself. But yeah, Anna and I, we are gaining so much from this processing and kind of giving ourselves assignments of thinking through
Mhm.
these things. And if you're listening and you enjoy just hearing us banter and share and laugh and swear and whatever else, I'm so, so happy, so thankful that you're here. But if you want to take it a step further and you're on your own journey, maybe pose some of the questions we're asking ourselves just as a fun experiment. You don't even have to journal. You can just think through it. But you know, we want to encourage growth. We want to encourage thinking outside of the box, challenging ourselves, challenging the way we see the world. Again, that's what season 2 is about. We're trying to kind of stick to the branding of season 2. And thanks for coming along. Thanks for being on the ride with us.
Absolutely. Yeah, we get to do this podcast because of it.
Exactly. And it's like so much fun. I absolutely love it.
So I have a couple of quotes I want to share before we
Yeah,
wrap
close
up.
us out.
Some of you may or may not be familiar with the 13th century poet Rumi, whose wisdom I glean from regularly. He said, "Recognize that unlearning is the highest form of learning." And even though our deconstruction is wrought with recognizing things that we were robbed of, it's such a harsh term, I know, but like things that we missed out on or things that we were deceived with, we are now at a place where we're learning at a higher level. I think we're more open and more aware. And those two things, the awareness mainly, has helped us take life to the next level. Like we've graduated that form of learning and now we're moving on to the next form of learning, and I'm thankful for that. The second thing I wanted to read another quote, another one from Pema, good old Pema.
Yes, girl.
We think that the point is to pass the test or overcome the problem, but the truth is that things don't really get solved. They come together and they fall apart. Then they come together again and they fall apart again. The healing comes from letting there be room for all of this to happen. Room for grief, room for relief, room for misery, room for joy. So what we're doing in this podcast is we're creating space for processing, room for grief, room for joy. And it's a part of our healing process. And I like to think that hopefully out there, it's a part of some other people's healing process as well.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, you and I both hear from people, wow, thanks for sharing, or that episode was amazing. It made me think things I never thought about before, or I feel so encouraged. I'm not alone. Yeah. So I think that's a good reminder just to say that for you and me, to realize we are making a difference. It's obviously our goal. And it's easy to remember the negatives, right? It's easy to focus on those instead of really highlighting the positives that are coming out of it. And yeah, it's those messages, those texts, those phone calls, those voice messages, whatever, that really put a skip in our step. And we're very thankful. Do you have anything else to share? Because I actually have a quote.
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Go for it. No, that's good.
And feel free to finish it with me because I'm pretty sure you know it. Most people have heard it of our listenership. It goes something like this. Peace out. That is a quote by the Heretical Hippies.
Yep, we coined it. It's ours. Oh my gosh.
Hey, if you made it this far, damn, you're a rock star. Thank you so much for listening to us, and let us know who you are. We want to hear from your sweet little face. Check back in for the next episode to experience more hippie nonsense, talk more heresy, and share more laughs.